want to know.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of Social Media and Marketing, Kristen Graves.
So it is time now for changing the game. From sports columnist to TV anchor to podcast host, you've learned that Jemele Hill has built a career defined by adaptability, fearless growth, and unwavering commitment to pushing boundaries. She's mastered new mediums, sparked important conversations, and continuously stayed ahead of the curve. Now we get to hear firsthand how and why she does it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Black Enterprise Woman of Power Luminary, Jemele Hill. And guiding this powerful conversation, please welcome back our moderator, Black Enterprise's very own, Alisa Gumbs.
I have the honor of sitting here with Jemele, who I respect so much as a journalist, and I've been so excited to be able to sit down with you and talk about some of the behind-the-scenes things. You, maybe more than a lot of other journalists, have been the news yourself, but there's a lot going on behind that. So we're going to go through how you got here.
Okay.
You've been very methodical about how you built your career. Take us through your career journey up to ESPN and tell us why it was so important to you to take on roles that you felt would make you versatile.
Okay. Well, first, I want to publicly apologize to Monique Rodriguez because I called her Michelle when I gave my speech. So, if I did it publicly, let me apologize publicly. And so, sis, I'm very sorry that I said your name wrong. And I messed around. Maybe I was thinking too much about Fast and the Furious, the actress, Michelle Rodriguez. So let me apologize first for getting her name wrong. And secondly, in terms of my career journey, let me give you the truncated version of this. I'm really fortunate in many ways. I feel kind of guilty when younger journalists ask me about my career path because I was an anomaly in the sense that I knew in the 10th grade that I wanted to be a sports journalist, specifically a sports journalist. I was a big sports fan. I've loved sports ever since I can remember. I was a neighborhood tomboy, played sports growing up, but I also loved reading and I loved language. And I was inspired by books and the things that I read. And so back in those days, kiddos, we read something called a newspaper. All right. And so to keep up, I'm from Detroit, so to keep up with all the local sports teams, I read the paper. And we didn't have a newspaper subscription. My mother used to clean houses. And she cleaned the house of an elderly white man named Mr. Miller, and he had a subscription to both the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News, so I was able to read the sports section, because sometimes I had to go with her to work, and so while she cleaned, I would be reading the sports section cover to cover, and so that was sort of my introduction into writing. And so when I got to high school, shout out to the mighty Mumford Mustangs. All of us from Detroit didn't go to Cass, just so you know. When I got to high school, I took a journalism class, and part of that class, you put together the high school newspaper. And the way we did it then in Detroit is that all of the high school newspapers were actually published by the local paper, the Detroit Free Press. So once a month, we had to go down to the Free Press to put the finishing touches on our paper. And so the first time I saw a professional newsroom, I was hooked. And I was like, this is what I want to do. The newsroom was a crazy place. You had people shouting and running and activity. And I was like, oh my God, whatever this is, I want to be part of this. And every step that I took after that was about that. I answered phones in the sports department of the Free Press my senior year of high school. I went to Michigan State because they had a journalism program. Go white, all right. I went to Michigan State because they had a very strong journalism program, worked for my college paper, had a bunch of internships. So the bulk, or at least the first 10 to 12 years of my career, I was in newspapers. This TV thing just kind of happened. Even when ESPN hired me in 2006, they hired me as a writer to write columns for ESPN.com. And it just so happens, I guess, when you can create conversation with your columns, that they tend to stick people like that on television. Stephen A. Smith was a newspaper writer and columnist. And so they started sticking me on television. And it's one of the rare times where I think ignorance is actually helpful. I didn't know that, I didn't know much about TV or about being a broadcaster. So I went in from day one just being myself because that's all I knew how to do. I wasn't trying to imitate other people. I wasn't trying to be someone else on TV. I was only me. And it turned out that kind of worked. And so when I started doing shows like First Take and Around the Horn and different stuff that you see on ESPN, it just kind of caught fire. And when I knew that I wanted to pursue broadcasting sort of full time, I saw a paper, or I saw some stories out of New York that Matt Lauer was going to get paid $25 million a year. And I was like, that's what TV people can make? Sign me all the way up, right? Because there's only so much they're gonna pay a writer, okay? It's like, but a TV person, what you can make is infinite. And so I was like, you know what? I should give this TV thing a try. I guess it was two things. It was sort of reading about Matt Lauer's contract, and also the very first week that I did First Take, maybe like 3 weeks later, I got a check in the mail for $3,500. And I did maybe in the course of the week, maybe 30 minutes of television, right? When I was on the show, because we were in certain segments. I was only in certain segments of the show. And I'm like, one, I didn't know I was gonna get paid. I had no idea this check just showed up. And I was like, they would pay me this to do that? Yes, I'm going to pursue this. So I'm not afraid to tell journalists, even though many of us, when we got into this job, like we never anticipated the idea of making money or being some kind of celebrity or anything like that. That was not the mission. When we signed up, many of us, to do this, we knew we were gonna be broke. When I was in college, I remember, I think it might have been Newsweek, one of the larger publications, they put out a list of top 100 professions based off salary. Journalist was 98th, okay? Like the average salary for a journalist when I was in college was $19,000 a year. And looking at my tuition, I was like, ooh, I am hustling backwards. So I signed up to be broke, but I wanted to write and I had a passion for it. Hence why I also tell young people, if you're passionate about it, you'll make money. You'll be good at it because you'll automatically sort of have that drive and that ambition. But anyway, so the versatility that I was able to get at ESPN was just purely a byproduct of kind of how the function of how the network is. It's like, I went from columns to suddenly appearing as analyst, then to hosting. It's the best way to prove value there, is that you have to prove that you can do a bunch of different things. And television is kind of the straw that stirs the drink at ESPN. So I didn't get into this to do television. My dream job was to work at Sports Illustrated because that's where writers went. Yeah. And so when the TV thing happened, it was really honestly just me seizing an opportunity. And also I saw the power of television. It's kind of hard to deny how impactful it can be. And when I was at ESPN, there were hardly any women who were on these opinion shows, like driving the shows with their opinion. Like, of course, we see sideline reporters, the majority of them are women, and you see women who are in hosting roles, but most of those roles are teeing up other men to give their opinion. It was very few people that were in the box that I was in. And early on when I started doing TV, I thought it hurt me a little bit because, the thing about television, and I think this applies cross industries, is people like to do things that have only been done before, generally speaking. Like when they can prove, when they already have proof of concept and they know it works, that's what they want to do. It's not a lot of people who want to do something that breaks the mold. And because there were not a lot of women around the network who were doing what I was doing, I thought that I had a very small chance of one day getting my own show, because there was not another me. And then on top of that, being black, being a woman, and then looking around TV and seeing like, oh, so somebody has a blonde fetish, huh? Like it was not a lot of us, they just weren't checking for black women like that. And so the versatility happened as partly based off survival. Because that was the only way I could sort of prove my value, is by being able to do a bunch of different things at ESPN.
We're going to come back to TV, but when you first wrote a column, you were in college. And even from that early age in your career, you were considered polarizing. You used the word despise, actually, by audiences both white and black. Now, for most of us, not being liked is a hard pill to swallow. How did you deal with that?
So here's the thing is that I never thought of myself as polarizing. I realized that my problem wasn't that I was polarizing. The problem was I said things too early. As in, before everybody else was like, you know what? Because if I told you some of the opinions that I had in college, nobody in here would find these to be particularly polarizing. Like, is it polarizing to say reverse racism doesn't exist? I mean, I don't think it is. Like, I don't think that's a polarizing necessarily opinion because it happens to be true. Reverse racism does not exist. So when I was saying stuff like that in college, it created a lot of reaction from people. And even, like writing about race and O.J. Simpson and these things, it's like a lot of the things that we talk about, but it's just, I caught on before people, everybody else in the room sort of agreed, but it was a good experience to go through because, part of writing is that you have to be able to tell the truth, and particularly a truth that people might not always want to hear. And, kind of in journalism right now, it's really disheartening to see truth being abandoned and to see people obeying in advance. And that's not what journalism was ever supposed to do. The whole point of being a journalist is to disrupt. Like, it was a phrase that I learned when I was in journalism school that we used to kind of say all the time, and something we tried to live by, which is your job is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That is your job. And
say that again for them.
comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That is a journalist's job to do. And so you're supposed to hold powers that be accountable. You're supposed to question them. You're supposed to create a watchdog-like environment of powerful people, structures, and institutions. And so understanding what that meant and the power of words with the things that I was writing in college, it helped me to better understand the mission, and frankly, it prepared me for some of the blowback and the criticism I would face later in my career. The only difference being then people were writing how much they hated you via snail mail, but now they have a direct connection to you on social media, and you can immediately hear once you piss them off. So that was sort of the difference, and it put me in the mindset is that your job as a journalist is not to be liked. In fact, it should probably be the opposite.
Before you co-hosted your own ESPN show, you were considered for show after show, and you were passed over time after time.
Right.
You said in your book that it made you feel like too much and like not enough all at the same time.
Yeah, that was a difficult time because the thing about a place like ESPN is that you have a lot of very talented people there. Everybody's fighting for real estate, trying to find a way to latch on, to stick, to be seen, frankly, at the network. And it was, I think every black woman or black person in this room has been through that, or we've all heard that phrase, we just don't know what to do with you. We've all heard some variation of that, and it is frustrating because you're almost being penalized for your talent, right? You're being penalized because you are different, because you do break the mold, because you're standing outside of what is the norm, and that should be embraced. That should be a good thing. But it can be a bad thing for you at the network level if they don't know where to slot you. And so I had all these tools and these abilities. I covered, college football and college basketball. I covered teams, leagues, players, championships, Super Bowls, NBA finals. Like, I literally covered everything. If I were a man, they would have known exactly what to do with me. They would have given me a show, right? And it wouldn't have taken me sort of winning the war of attrition is how I got my first show. My first show at ESPN was a show called Numbers Never Lie, which eventually became His and Hers, which a lot of people became familiar with. But I got, thank you.
Fans of His and Hers.
Yeah. But I got Numbers Never Live because Jalen Rose, fellow Detroiter, a friend of mine, he was leaving the show, and he was going to focus full time on doing NBA Countdown, and they were looking around for people to kind of immediately replace him. And luckily, I had a good friendship with the host, my friend Michael Smith, and Michael advocated for me, Jalen advocated for me, proof that Black men do and should advocate for Black women in the workplace. And so when that, happened, it was sort of like I was a bit of a last resort. And it wound up, obviously wound up having a very successful run, but it was hard at first to hear all those no's. But, eventually what I told myself was that sometimes no's are yeses. You know what I mean? It's like, or yeses in disguise, because the no's that I received were part of a larger plan because I wasn't a fit. If I look back on those no's and the shows that turned me down or the projects, I used to call myself, I think I joked about this in my book, I used to call myself the original ESPN crash test dummy, because like whenever they were trying to test a new show or they were creating a new show, I was always on the call list to come in and audition, and it never worked out, not one time. And I think about what happened to those shows, and I was like, man, it actually was a good thing that I was told no, because those shows did not last. And so sometimes that's what we have to keep in mind, is that there's a larger plan, a larger purpose that's at play, and that closed door is not just a closed door, or as the wonderful Asia Wilson said, or I think she tweeted this, is that the answer is not always no, sometimes it's just not right now.
Yeah. You gave us a little bit of foreshadowing for the blowback. In 2017, you were co-hosting SportsCenter, which is the crown jewel of ESPN's TV shows. In September of that year, you tweeted that Trump was a white supremacist, which of course set off a firestorm. A month later,
Still true. So,
A month later, you were suspended by ESPN for violating their social media guidelines after tweeting that fans who were upset about Jerry Jones' threat to bench any players who disrespected the flag should boycott the advertisers who support Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. Now, that was then, and I think it probably still is, the most public example ever of a Black woman getting in trouble with corporate America for saying how she felt. A month later, in 3 months, you transitioned off of SportsCenter. A year later, you left ESPN, period. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from that time?
Much like I said a moment ago, I was like, I was just early. That's what it was. I was early. I was early with that. Now it's like they say that about him now, like it's his middle name. So it's just like, if only I'd have waited, No, but so one of the bigger lessons, I learned a lot of things. One about how even if you're in a high profile position, if, as a member of the Black community, is that when you feel like you pour into your community, as I have, and love Black people unconditionally and always will, is when those moments hit, we are down to fight. And our community held me down in a way I did not see coming, nor did I anticipate. And it was really remarkable to see that level of support and love, even from a lot of people I didn't know. Even among the players I never had a conversation with Kevin Durant ever. And he sent me a private message. He said something publicly. At that point, I don't think I'd ever met LeBron James, and he said something. I knew Colin Kaepernick in passing. He said something. He spoke out. So seeing that widespread support had a lot to do with probably why I didn't get fired. Because for as much of the people that were upset by what I said about the president, there was a lot of people that agreed with me. And because ESPN wanted to, obviously, they wanted to stay in business with these athletes and to, be still connected to them, them having my back is what that gave me a sense of protection. So learning that, it's important to stay, it's important to just stay connected to community was a big lesson. And how that can pay off later. And that's not to say that, that's the only reason that you do it. You do it for far bigger reasons, but still that was what held me down. Because at the end of the day, when I don't have the ESPN title or when I don't do some of these other career things, I'm gonna still be Black and I got to come back home, So
That's facts.
Yeah, that's facts. So it's like, that still has to happen. So that was one part. And the other part too was understanding firmly, and it's not like I didn't know this before, but sometimes you need a reminder, and I got a public one. These relationships that we have professionally are all conditional. These are conditional, transactional relationships. I'd been at ESPN at that point 12 years. It was the longest job I'd ever had. It was the best job that I'd ever had, and even with all the relationships and the goodwill and all of the things that I had built up being at that company, for as life-changing as it was, when it came to the bottom line, they were going to protect what they felt like they needed to protect. And if I was sacrificed because of that, then that's what it was. And so even though it was heartbreaking, because when the president publicly called me out, I come from a journalism cloth, something that was very true in newspapers at one time. I don't know if it's as true as it is now, but you don't let City Hall come after your reporters. You don't do that. And when they didn't publicly say anything to defend me, that's when I knew our relationship was over. And it was a hard conclusion to come to, especially with the equity I'd poured into the company, but I also understood, like, this is what it is. And this is how a lot of our relationships with these businesses and companies are. It's like, it's totally conditional. And so we have to sometimes remove the emotion. So that was another part. And the third thing was it forced me to speed up my plan. I never was under any illusion that I was going to be at ESPN for 30 years. Like, that was never what I thought it would be. I mean, hell, I was surprised to be there 12. I was like, how did that happen? But because I was there, I realized I had gotten complacent, and that the bigger dreams that I had, I sort of put off, because I'm thinking, like, in terms of contracts, like, oh, when this contract is up, maybe I'll get to this. Seeing how that happened and understand how fragile sometimes your job security is, I was like, you know what? It put the battery in my back to do the things I'd always been dreaming of doing. And that's why when we're in these, even if we're in the most comfortable and what we assume to be a safe professional position, we cannot get complacent. Like, those dreams that you have that are deep inside of you, you have to find a way to bring them to the forefront, because time is precious. And so I realized, like, I kind of had been wasting time, and I didn't even conceptualize it that way. But it was after those things happened that I realized that, I need to get busy living, to quote my man Red from Shawshank. I need to get busy living. And so I intentionally left SportsCenter. A lot of people thought that they kicked me off SportsCenter. They did not, because I had the equivalent in my contract of a no trade clause. That was the only show I was contracted to do. And so I had to tell them I want off this show, because I got tired of every day fighting to be myself. Because once that happened, they sort of made it clear that, they kind of wanted. We used to have a joke where we say, like, they want to make SportsCenter great again. So, so once that was very clear, that's what they wanted to do. I'm like, I'm not coming today every day fighting to be Black. This is not gonna happen. So, I was done with that, and so I was like, I want off the show, and I want to pursue some other things at the company. But all in the back of my head, I knew that, like, I'm gonna leave them before they find a reason to hang me out to dry. So I left early.
We're going to be able to take 2 questions, just 2 questions. So if you have questions, please line up now. Pivoting after ESPN, you've moved in a direction that's very entrepreneurial. You've diversified your revenue streams with speaking and consulting in addition to writing. You have a production company, and you've had deals now with both Spotify and iHeart. Mm-hmm. What has the learning curve been like for you going from Jemele Hill, the journalist, to Jemele Hill, the business?
Hard. It was a transition I never saw coming because, again, you get into this to write stories and to tell the truth and all these other kinds of things. But, once I left there, it forced me to do something that I had really no intention of doing. And it's been hard. It's been some ups, it's been some downs. That's why, I spoke earlier about this idea that as much as we can sometimes present a pretty team picture, there's a lot going on behind that. But I became a better journalist when I became a better businesswoman, to be honest, because I realized once I left there that I really had to be a stronger advocate for myself, to go into these relationships with a much different mindset than I had before. Like now, my mindset is I don't work for people, I work with people, right? And I think that has really changed how I approach things. And you also better understand the weight and responsibility. Like once you become, I'm sure a lot of the business owners in the room can relate to this, once you make that transition and you are a business owner, you become responsible for the livelihoods of other people. And that is very heavy because people are dependent on you to put their kids through college. They're dependent on you when they make a cross-country move to join your business and all this. And so it really, the responsibility of it, I think at times was overwhelming for me. Yeah. And there were some business relationships that I ended because I just didn't think that they were serving me, or serving the mission that I was on, I should say, would be a better way to put it. But in doing that and having people that I employ, I'm also leaving them vulnerable, and that was tough. So I learned a lot of things about leadership. I learned a lot of things about business, but more the biggest thing that I learned was to always bet on me. And I know it sounds very cliche to say that, but we spend a lot of times, especially when we're working for other people, when we think about what we've invested and how much money we've made other people, the reason you bet on yourself, because you're not gonna let yourself down. If you didn't let the people down that were making way more off you than you were making off them, why would you do that to yourself? Like, you won't. And so it taught me a lot about making sure at every table I'm at, not just advocating for myself, but be bold in doing it. And if they choose to go another direction, then they just do. And I can live with that as long as I know that I went into that room being fully who I am. Yeah.
We have a question.
Hello. Yes. My name's Kafi Kumasi. I'm from Detroit. What up, though?
What up, though?
This has been a real pleasure for me, this whole conference, so I'm going to keep it short and sweet. But one of the things you said about complacency really struck with me. I came to this conference to think about my next steps, having golden handcuffs as a full professor, but knowing that there's something more for me. But my question is, I've watched your career somewhat close to far in the last 5 or 6 years, and what I really think you have a knack at is knowing the balance of granularity, like being accessible. You responded to my DM, and I laced her with some of my turnover buff gear. I'll tell you about that. But your balance of granularity and then being adept at managing social media. So I want to know what your team looks like, if you can name the roles of people on your immediate team. And if I can shoot my shot, I'm going to do an Instagram Live reflecting on my experiences at the conference. Because someone said, you have to share what you know at this conference. So I'm going to go live. This is scary for me, and this is why I'm asking who's on your team, because I'm not going to worry about what it looks like, but I want to, all the people that I've met here, I want to share that with other people. So we're going to just go live on Instagram. I'm going to bring people in, and I'm gonna shoot my shot and ask Jemele if she'll attend. I'll have it all in order and everything.
Okay.
Let's get to the question,
Who's
though.
on your team?
Okay, so I do have a wonderful person who, I do my own social media, but I do have someone who also does the social media for my podcast, Spolitics, and I consult with her. Her name is Nicole Williams. She's amazing. And she was somebody I worked with at ESPN before, and so she's in a consultant advisory role, but she put together my YouTube page, taught me about monetization, which is very important, and understanding how that works with your social media, and she's been great. And so she's on my team. I also have an executive producer and an audio engineer that I work with named Lucas, and my team is like smaller now than it was when I was at Spotify. I mean, most of this team is dedicated to my iHeart podcast. And then just for me as a personal brand, I have a publicist, Bianca Shelton, who's Black. And you'd be shocked, like the number, especially I guess because I live in Los Angeles, the number of people who, like the world, in the world of publicity, like there's not a lot of us who are in that role, and especially not with visible people. And so I was very intentional in wanting to work with Black women and bring them along on this journey with me. So Bianca's my publicist. My chief of staff is my best friend from high school. We've been 10 toes down for 30 plus years, DJ, and she actually lives here in Las Vegas, strangely enough. So as you put together your team, even if they might not have the same level of experience that you might be able to get elsewhere, but as you're climbing, the ability to bring your folks with you matters, because the loyalty matters sometimes more than the skill does, and the loyalty and the protection, that matters more sometimes. So I would just say, as you're building and creating whatever you want your social brand to be, think about that very seriously in that regard. But yeah, like, I mean, a lot of times with social media, it's just trial and error sometimes. And when you look at all the big names and influencers who've been able to really create something for themselves, a lot, early on, it was very much trial and error. So don't be afraid, to put yourself out there, but make sure you're putting yourself out there in the way in which you feel like serves you. I do, while as much as I put things on social media, there's a lot of things I don't put on social media for a reason, And so, because I want to be very careful about what I'm putting out there. So just keep that in mind as you create this new brand and you take on this new season of your life.
Yeah, thank you. Let's thank Jemele for being so open and candid about her journey. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you all.